So yeah.
Okay, we are live.
All right. All right, let's see. I hereby call this public hearing regarding FY 2023 property tax levy to order at 7 PM. We have a property tax levy presentation.
Okay. So it would be the same presentation that we had last month. Does anybody have any questions? Do you want us to briefly go through it? How would the board like to see that?
Let's just say go through it one more time.
We'll try and do that as quickly as possible. Let's get down to the levy section.
So just a little bit of background for anyone who is interested in reading, some interesting bedtime, literature. This document's posted out to the, district website under the business office page, but essentially what this document does is provides, a number of definitions specific to the tax levy, as well as, walks the reader through step by step how the levy is calculated. So all of the numbers are there, they're presented, in basically a table that offers the steps of the levy, which is
Right here.
there. So the interesting thing about the levy is that it's a set equation. And while this looks like a table, it's actually an equation. It takes the estimated equalized assessed value from the county. It looks at what the capped levy was last year, and we cannot increase it more than the lesser of CPI or 5%. So it applies this 5% cap. Then we walk into step 2, the amount the levy can increase. So again, we look at the prior year levy, tack on 5% because the December 2022 CPI, it was over 5%. I want to say, can't recall, I think it was closer to 7% last December. So we're capped at that 5%. That gives us the amount the levy can increase, which is just over $630,000. The step 3 determines the total cap levy without new construction. So it looks at last year's capped levy, the amount the levy can increase. That's the new levy without construction. We jump down to step 4, which determines the limiting rate, which we'll see on the next page in just a moment. But the steps there are taking the EAV less new construction, dividing it by 100. That's the total levy without new construction. It gives us a PTEL capped rate, and PTEL is a county that we are in which we cannot levy more than 5%. And then when we jump down to step 5, the levy generated by new construction. Now we're looking at the new construction that the county has assessed within our district. We apply the PTEL capped rate, and row 18 shows us what our new construction tax levy can be. So then down at the bottom, we add the new construction tax levy and the tax levy, the amount that was calculated, I think in step 3, for a total of, you can scroll down, just over $380 million. So the estimated increase in the cap levy is $759,637. It's an increase of just over 6% from last year's levy. So then what we do is we take that number, that's 6.02%. If we jump down to the next table, And we apply it across the 9 funds within our accounting structure within the school district. So what this table is doing is it's simply increasing last year's levy broken out by fund, increasing it by 6.02%. But as we talked about in the past, we want to levy a little bit more than that 6.02%. Just to capture any new properties that the county may not have captured when they provided us with their EAP estimate. So what we do is we go down to the next table, we balloon it. We're asking for a levy this year of 7.58. So an increase of 7.58% over last year's levy. And we divvy it across the 9 funds, but as you can see here where the arrow is, the increase isn't broken out evenly. So when we're going through determining which funds are to be increased, we have to think of need. So as we know, we have some new buses coming on. We have a bigger bus lease next year. So you can see there's a slightly, well, just under 19% of an increase in the transportation fund. Life safety has a 0% because we have met all of the criteria of the life safety plan, so we can no longer levy in that fund. And then both education and the building funds were slightly over 6.02% as well. As you can see too, in the bond and interest row, we have a negative 100%. That's indicating that our bond payment for the middle school is coming off the books. CEDAL, IMRF, we are required to pay CEDAL and IMRF payment each year. It dropped about, I think, $10,000. So we have about a 62% decrease there. So our total ask for this year's levy is $13,583,187. Again, that's a 7.58% from last year's levy. Because we went over the 5%, we had to post a truth in taxation in the newspaper in the beginning of December. That was done. So we're in compliance with that law. And that was a really quick walkthrough of the tax levy. Does anyone have any questions, or would anyone like to focus on any part in a little bit more detail?
I have a question. I don't want to focus on any specific part. Do we, as a district, and almost all school districts, always look at, hey, what's the most we can take and then take it? Or do we say, this is what we think we're gonna need, and this is what we take? Because schools are always short, so they always take the most.
So are you asking, would if this was an example, are you asking if the school district would say take 10%? Just to take even more?
No, as a school district, and I'm not even talking about us specifically, as most school districts, typically always seem to be short. Is the way you work through taxing, is it, okay, this is what we can take, we're gonna take it and then apply it to what we need? Or do we say, this is what we need, this is what we're gonna take? I mean, are there always needs that we know we're not gonna see? You follow what I'm saying?
Yes,
Or
so.
okay, we can take 5%, so let's just take the 5%.
Right.
Really, we only need 3. Or is that just completely never happens?
Well, it's not a direct relationship because you don't know what your budget is for next year. So because we're taxing from 2 years ago, we're always continually trying to catch up with taxes. So there's not a direct correlation between, okay, we know what this year's budget is and we can tax that amount. We don't know what next year's budget is because that doesn't get approved until October. We start spending on next year's budget in July 1st. The approval is not actually by the board until end of September.
So because
October,
of
it's
that
due.
lag and things that are not seen a lot of times or unanticipated things.
Right.
We're not working from a plan like you typically would in finance. Okay,
It's a little bit different.
Just catching up. We're just taking basically what's mandated by the state or what we can get and say, okay, this is what we're taking and we gotta make it work.
So I think what you're trying to get at too is what a school district will do. Let's say fund balances are increasing and we have There are districts in the state that have 2+ years of fund balance in reserve. Not us, but there are districts that do exist that have significant fund balances. And if they don't have a plan for using that, they don't need any facilities needs or maintenance to take care of that or to spend that on, and they want to give some back, what they'll do is they'll levy the full amount and then abate those taxes because they don't know what that number is going to do in the future. So this looks great because we're sitting at the CPI inflation rate 7%. And we're able to collect up 6.02% is what we're anticipating. But actually, we're still losing because our costs go up more than inflation is us too. The school district has expenses, gas increases, our bus leases increase, our cost of employment increases, our benefits package increases with especially medical insurance is increasing at a much more rapid rate than inflation even. So our expenses are still going up, even if we just maintain status quo. And we're catching up from years where the CPI was less than 1% because we had 20+ years of under 2% inflation on average. So if you look at district costs, educational costs have increased at a greater rate than 2% a year. So you're trying to replace, now is the time in a year like this where you can catch up a little bit and actually build a little bit of reserve and you would want to collect it all because you don't know what next year's CPI is going to be. Well, we do, actually, it's going to be around 3%, I think, is what I'm seeing. And looking at the gas pumps, I'm even a little more freaked out because gas in December always drops and now gas is starting at $2 something a gallon in Wisconsin, which is wonderful for driving. But when you're a school district and that's a big player in the CPI, it tends to drop the CPI down because it compares December to December.
A couple years back, it's they explained the problem with the limit on the amount you can raise is then everybody's forced to keep that way, because if you have a year where you have a balance and you cut taxes, well then the next year if something happens, you can't raise your taxes enough to catch up.
Yeah.
So what people do is tax as much as they can, and then if they have too much, then they abate that.
Yeah. So in the spring, and we've done that. Well, the Melbourne district has done that. So we've abated taxes twice in the recent history where we have said, okay, we have enough to give back to taxpayers some money to help offset the taxes. 3 times, well, we did last year.
Mhm.
And we're going to do it again this year. So this will be the 4th time in the last 6 or 7 years. So we are trying to do that with the property tax relief grant. It's great because we're getting most of that back from the state this year. So it's more of an exchange. It's a bigger number. So good news this year. We are proud of that. It's great. Wonderful. They're going to be a lot less this year.
Any other questions? Okay. I am supposed to request resident presenters concerning FY 2023 property levy tax. Madam Secretary, record the names of those residents desiring to speak on the topic. Nope, okay. Adjournment of public hearing then.
I move to adjourn the public hearing. Second.
Motion made and seconded. Don't need a roll call. No.
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Let us go to our regular agenda. I hereby call to order this December 11th, Milburn CC School District 24 Board of Education, regular Board of Education meeting. Madam Secretary, could you please call the roll?
John Francis,
Here.
Brendan Murphy,
Here.
Peter Petrini,
Here.
Lillian Phelps, John Ruggles.
Here.
Fred Stepson.
Here.
And Lisa Brewster. Here.
Madam Secretary, do we have any public comments?
No. Pledge of allegiance.
Oh, pledge of allegiance.
Oh, no. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. We have one housekeeping item that we need to take care of in the addition of non-action items. We need to appoint a secretary pro tem because our current secretary has gotten out of the country. So I need a volunteer or volunteers.
I'll volunteer.
Okay. Anyone else?
We need two separate.
No, we need one. And then we need a vote. So-
For-
All in favor? Fred?
Second.
Do you need a roll call that one?
No.
All right, Fred, you're it. All right. Are there any other non-action items that we need to discuss? Nope. Okay. Then we are due for our Timberly presentation.
All right. We have a,
We
Hank-
decided to come and share our passion for a place we call Timberly. You guys, it's just a line item for you, you just pay the bill, right? Well, we're here to show you that Timberly needs so much more than just a line item or paying the bill. Sixth grade teachers are pretty passionate about Timberly, so we came to share with you the amazing activities. You'll see the smiles on the faces of the children, just all sorts of stuff. So Timberly sits on 600 acres. And this year we had beautiful weather. Once again, we've been blessed quite a few times. It hasn't really rained on us. It's been warm. Even last year when we took the seventh graders the first week in November, it was unseasonably 70 degrees until the last day when it was seasonably 35. So, anyway, Mrs. Vivian, Mrs. Phelan, and I are here to share with you, our passion and let Mrs. Vivian take you through some of the activities we do.
All right, so at Camp Timberly, there's a lot of activities for the kids to do. It brings them outside of their box. A lot of kids would not do certain activities anywhere else, or even if they're exposed to it somewhere else, they're not comfortable enough doing it, but then when they get to Timberly, they're like, oh, I can do this. So some of the things that they do are zip lining. The kids extremely loved it. At first, they were a little scared to do it just because it's really intimidating, but once they're up there, like, yes, I want to do this again and again. We go on a really long hike, we learn about trees and plants and things that we even have in our own backyard that are actually, we can use as our benefit. There's archery, there's a leather shop where kids get to take home an item that they actually make. There's physical discovery where students learn all about electricity and all of those fun things, make their hair fly in the sky. There's a lot of team building where kids learn how to successfully accept others' help. And then there's animal encounters where they find a lot of snakes and turtles and little cuddly things that they can go home and cuddle. Then we also do a lot of canoeing. There's a huge lake out there that the kids can canoe with a group of others. There's a campfire where they do a talent show, and there's pictures of the kids this year that were doing that talent show. There's a wolf pack where it's completely dark. They're not even allowed to use flashlights during this wolf pack, but they're hunting for the wolf during this time, and we hear the wolf howling, and our job is to find the wolf. Wolf is obviously not a wolf, it's a human. And then there's wilderness survival where students learn to build fire. And then a suitcase where this was the funniest of them all. It was my first year actually going to Timberly at Melbourne. I used to work at OBS. I went there moons ago, but we did a smelly shoe contest, a burping contest. The kids had a lovely time with it. It was pretty disgusting.
And the next part is a little video. One of the parents actually put this together for us, so let's go ahead and just watch that.
And of course, it's always fine. I probably could catch up to you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Entertaining. It's always entertaining. You never know what you're gonna get. They're very creative. Afterward, we have the kids, tell us some of their thoughts about the trip. So I'm just gonna read through a few of those. I have more confidence since I was at Camp Timberlane. I made a lot of new friends, and when I was more myself. It's really nice, especially students that maybe are more on the shy side, or they're new to the district, or they just haven't had the opportunity to hang out with kids outside of school. And so a lot of them, with it being at the beginning of the year, it's really nice to kind of pull them out of their shell, give them that experience, let them meet new people they might not meet anyways, if maybe they don't have classes with them. So they get, a lot of our groupings are very random, and so there was a wide variety of people that they meet with, they go to classes with, so they get to meet a lot of different people. I learned that everyone's good at something and no one is best at everything. I didn't realize how much inner strength and confidence I have. No matter how hard a task is, I should always try. We can all work together. It doesn't matter who you are. My classmates are like family. You may not get along, but you have to deal with it. I made friends better than I thought. After leaving camp, I felt different. I felt like I transformed into a whole better person. I learned a lot of stuff here. I'm really proud of myself. And then we also had a letter from a parent. This is one that was sent in. It says, my son came home from the trip super happy and said he had the best time. Please tell the staff and teachers I appreciate them. And by having the 24-hour challenge and the Timberley trip right at the beginning of the school year, it has had such a positive effect on my child. He enjoys school and it has really helped to make friends and also become closer to the friends he already had for the last year. I am so impressed by the experiences you have given the kids, and I know these will be lasting memories for them. That's from Rachel Brennan.
Oh, sure. So, we just came to thank you too, because you guys, many years ago, this trip started to become expensive, and you talked about transportation. You pay for the buses, so thank you. You pay for the buses, and then our free and reduced students also are paid for by, the school district. So without your support, we couldn't take the kids there. We can't do anything on this magnitude here at school. We have to take them there. We completely take all electronics away. There are no cell phones, no games. They are so busy. They come back and they go, whoa, that's right. I didn't have my phone for all those things, which is in today's culture. We have more problems with the parents and the cell phones than we do with the students and the cell phones. So, so we go away and we write the parents every morning to tell them, hey, we're all still alive. We're all still here. We're having a great time. Kids are busy from morning to night, and we see a tremendous growth in them because they can't come to us as little fifth graders. And then we take them away and they come back I'm not gonna tell you they're super mature now, but they are, you know, they just kind of gain a sort of a confidence in themselves and do some of that negotiating and tough stuff and kind of grow up a little bit. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and we'll go sixth grade, go Timberlake. Do you have any questions?
That lake, so you said it's a full 600 acres, the campus up is the whole lake, the camps, or is it shared?
It is, the camp owns that lake and the property on the other side of it. So one of our hikes, we haven't done it in a long time, but, we used to go, we had a lot of rain one year and it washed out our bridge. We used to go all the way around the lake, and we did it in the night sometimes, and that was super scary. You know, no flashlights out in the dark and going around the lake. But yes, it belongs to Timberlake. They have a lot of property. Timberlake actually went under last year. And we didn't think we were going back to see, but, there's, the man who owns a dealership, his name is Greg Keynes, up in, Milwaukee. And, his son went to Timberlake and it changed his life. Mr. Keynes couldn't let Timberlake go. So he assumed their debt and he's kept it open. He actually owns a construction company too. And so he's come in and he's fixed the things that needed fixing. He's done a lot with the place. So, 2 months ago, we were gonna write him a thank you note, but we're gonna get to that. So it's, it would have broken my heart if that would have happened. Any other questions?
I have a comment. You guys are phenomenal. I chaperoned it last year. I think you was talking about it before we started, like, you gotta do this. This is awesome. You will always, as long as I'm on the board, you will have an advocate for Timberlake. It was fantastic. Thank you and you guys for, I know a bunch of seventh graders last year who weren't gonna be able to go because of COVID. And you guys managed to get it. Well, they didn't get to go for their sixth grade, and you guys made it happen for their seventh grade. It was just, I can't talk enough about how awesome this is. And if you have younger kids, then you get the sixth grade chaperone. It's the bomb for the kids and chaperone. It's fantastic. So thank you for that. Yeah, I know you and Linda have been doing it for a long time. How long have you been doing it? It's, are you gonna be contracted? Are you gonna be contracted to continue?
No, actually, we brought the data.
Yeah. This trip's awesome. I know my son. And I'm hoping chaperone next year.
Oh, okay, so we have to make sure you use it. Sorry, this is.
He'll know this for the rest of his life. We suck it.
I'd like to echo that from, my daughter went last year and she's like, this is the greatest thing. I love it. This is the best weekend ever. I'm like, what'd you do? I can't talk about it. So I'm glad I got a presentation of what happens.
Thank you for your hard work. Appreciate it.
Right, audit presentation.
Okay. All right, we have an audit presentation next. For the CPAs in the room, and much more exciting than Timberlake maybe, but
Oh, no, Timberlake was way
I agree. I agree.
even the tax levy was.
Kathy, would you like to sit here?
I did not.
I mean, it doesn't matter. Whatever you- I'm not thinking.
You guys have it.
They've got the,
That's fine.
this in front of them, the actual report.
Okay, so I'm Kathy Norton. I'm with Cezian, formerly Casella and Company. We've been the district auditor for a number of years, and we had a name change this year, not an ownership change or anything else. It's just the same people, new name. Anyway, I've been involved with the audit for probably about 7 years, I would say. I was conducting the audit. And I moved, I shifted that work to other staff and or supervisors. So, I haven't been on site this year. I don't think I was last year. I miss coming out. It's a great place to visit. And it's great for us. I'm not so sure for the staff. I haven't gotten any complaints. So, the audit went extremely well, as expected. Carly, Brandy, and the other staff that we deal with are extremely organized, professional, responsive, and make our jobs a lot easier, so we appreciate that. As part of the audit, for those of you who don't know too much about the process, what we do, we come in and we evaluate the internal controls over the district finances. And so we, just kind of look and see the processes, the procedures, et cetera. And what we, noticed for the year is everything appears appropriate. Everything looks like it's designed properly, implemented as planned. And as part of the audit, we generally will make some recommendations. If we see things that could be done a little bit more efficiently in terms of like business office or something like that, we make recommendations about, again, financial reporting, things like that. And the management always takes our guidance and implements any kind of changes that we recommend. If we did encounter any kind of issues, we would issue a management letter, and that would just kind of lay out some findings that we had and recommendations for the district. And we're pleased to say that we had no management letter this year. So no management letter is really good news in terms of, again, those policies and procedures that are in place here. Really, that's really good. So, all right, I'm scrolling through the report. I'll mention page numbers as I go. I don't want to read through the whole report. I usually joke about like I'm going to, but I'm not going to joke because it's serious. So, I love my job. I love doing it. So, it is an honor reporting. All right, so the most important piece of this, besides not having a management letter comment, is that we've provided an opinion on the district's financial statements, and we are saying this is an unmodified opinion. In other words, it's a clean opinion. And what that means is that the financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, meaning they're free from any kind of material misstatements. Not saying they're absolutely perfect, we don't do that, but we determine the dollar amount of materiality in terms of significance, and we believe that the financial statements fairly represent the district. We also, as part of the audit, look at those internal controls that I mentioned. We look at compliance with laws and regulations. We generally test those controls to make sure that they are working properly and again implemented. And we don't provide an opinion on this. That's just not part of the audit of the financial statements. Doing that analysis of those internal controls help us determine whether those financial statements are materially correct. Okay, so the first section of the audit report then is going to be our opinion. That's what I just kind of described what you would read in the opinion letter. There is another letter that follows the opinion letter talking about that we've evaluated the district's controls and compliance under government law. The following section, I'm on page 86 of the report, is the management's discussion and analysis. I think this is really helpful for people that are not necessarily versed in financial statements. This is more of a narrative. There's a perspective of the district. It provides financial highlights. There are some summarized financial tables in there. It describes what types of funds the district has. And so again, for someone that doesn't have a ton of experience, this is a good way to just get kind of a snapshot. It's an executive summary, if you will, of what's happening in the audit report. Down to, and at any time, please feel free to interrupt me. I kind of go fast, and but if you have any questions as I go through, please feel free to interrupt. Right, so first, we have a couple of sets of financial statements in here. One of them, the first one that you'll encounter, is the government-wide financial statements. These are long-range, complete pictures of the government's net position and their activities for the year. this would be comparable to like a GAAP financial statement in a business. It takes into consideration not just the day-to-day activity, but any long-term resources and long-term obligations. So this is where you are going to see things like capital assets, the buildings and the equipment and so on. You're also going to see long-term obligations such as bonds payable or any other type of debt, and any pension or other post-employment benefit liabilities. Again, these are long range. What you see on here are deferred inflows and outflows, meaning sort of postponed items. These are paper liabilities at this point based on the formulas that are used within the state retirement plans and actuarial valuations. So again, in theory, this would make this comparable, again, with another district or another business. But it doesn't really focus on the short-term operational type finances that you're used to dealing with or seeing with your treasurer's report. So again, this is required statement, the statement of net position, statement of activities for those GAAP financial statements. The next set of financial statements are really more short-term. They exclude those long-term obligations and resources. So you won't see capital assets and things like that on those. You won't see pension liabilities, et cetera, on those financial statements. So just to point out, on the statement of position, this is on page 13. Again, this is overall, total net position of the district is positive $12.6 million, which sounds really good, but I do want to point out that a good chunk of the net position is sitting in capital assets. Another chunk of net position are restricted amounts that are held for things like student activity funds, any kind of tort fund balances. There's some restrictions on transportation money and retirement, the retirement fund, et cetera. So the unrestricted measure of net position for the district is a negative $6 million. Again, this is long-term overall picture, not necessarily useful on a day-to-day basis. The next statement is the statement of activities. Really, this is just a summary of revenue and expenses, very summarized look at revenues and expenses by program. And we're looking at, we break down those activities by things like instruction and support services and things like that. We also break it out by, are we earning revenue by charging services? Are we getting grants and contributions for operations? Are we getting capital grants for things like fixed assets? All right, so the change in that position was $6.6 million. So again, this ties into that number on the front statement. How did your net position get to $12 million compared to last year? This is just a summary of that. Right, so moving down, we're going to that. We're gonna have a test after.
No.
All right, we won't do that. Okay, the financial statements that I like to look at, again, just more on a current measurement focus, are the fund financial statements. We're starting on page 15 is the balance sheet. And this is, again, a little more useful for short-term planning and operations. What you would be looking at on this page is a balance sheet and showing assets, liabilities, and fund balance for each fund in the district. So you'll see the funds across the top, and then a list of those assets, et cetera. This is a good way to just kind of, evaluate the cash position, for the example, on the district. Look at what kind of liabilities are existing, et cetera. It also, at the bottom of page 15, this last section on page 15 is the fund balance. And it actually breaks down by type of item, those amounts of fund balance. So things that are non-spendable. So for example, if the district prepays its insurance for the next month or quarter or whatever it is, that money is still in fund balance, but it's not spendable. So sitting there, it's not in cash, it's just something that, a resource that you have to offset future costs. Anything that's restricted, those are restrictions coming from an outside source, such as tax levies, et cetera. And then assigned fund balances are those amounts that the board has designated or set aside for particular purposes. And then finally, unassigned is actually just basically the amounts that have not been broken for. So the district has an unassigned fund balance of $3.7 million. And again, we're not gonna go into any kind of analysis, but you could look at those fund balances as tab on 10, compare those amounts to the amount of expenditures you have in a given year and see sort of where you sit in terms of reserves. And again, I don't think that there are significant reserves built up here. But again, you could do that analysis, and probably do, at least the business office. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about that in a bit. So there's also a reconciliation in here on page 16. So we talk about the building acquisition, that first that we did with that in the government-wide financials, and then we looked at the balance sheet and fund financials. This reconciliation kind of walks you through, how did we get from this $6 million fund balance to the $12 million net position or whatever? It's just really outlining the differences between the two sets of statements. So again, sort of useful what we're saying about how did we have total assets here of X, and on this one it's total assets of a different amount. That reconciliation walks you through that. The next page is 17. Is the statement of revenues and expenditures. This gives a summary of revenues by source. So you can look at revenue, like for example, property taxes or any kind of state aid funding, any kind of sales within, you know, we're talking about sales of lunch, et cetera. So there's different types of categories there shown, again, broken out by funds across the page. So you can look at the total revenues. The expenditures are also listed again by those categories we talked about: instruction, support services, and so on. The excess is basically your unadjusted profit. That's at the bottom of that page 17. There are some others, occasionally some other sources and uses of funds. So debt payments might appear, or rather transfers, debt transfers, and so on would appear there on the other financing sources category. And then that again, the equivalent of the profit, if you will, is that net change in fund balance. And so for all funds combined, the net change in fund balance was $1.37 million. Last year, I'm always a year behind, so in fiscal 22, the net change was about 1.1. So pretty consistent with what was happening in the prior year. Overall, maybe not so much within funds. There is, following that statement of revenue is the reconciliation between that, again, that fund financial statement and the statement of activities earlier on. Starting on page 20 and going all the way to 45 are the notes of the video. And this is where one can look at a little bit more background behind what's happening in the financial statement. So some supporting details. So you'll see capital assets on the statement of net position. There's going to be a footnote, we call these the footnotes, that actually lay out the changes in categories of capital assets. Same thing if you want to look at what happened with the district's debt during the fiscal year. There's a reconciliation of the beginning debt plus any new debt minus any kind of payments and so on. And so all of these calculations and description in the footnotes sort of support the numbers that are on the page. And I'm not going to go through all of these. The only significant difference from your footnotes would be a new accounting principle, a governmental accounting principle adopted in fiscal 23 was GASB 96 for subscription-based, sorry, I was going to say IT, but subscription-based IT or information technology agreements. So that new standard required districts to evaluate any kind of long-term subscriptions for, it could be for curriculum, etc. So any kind of, there are things like firewall, whatever, IT-related agreements that the district had that spanned more than 1 year, a district would be required to report any material amounts in those subscriptions as assets. Typically, well, technically not an asset, but it's an intangible amount that would be reported in the financial statements, and any long-term obligation. So the district was going to be paying out, $300,000 a year for the next 3 years or something like that, then that would be reported as a liability or an obligation for the district. So we evaluated all the contracts that we were made aware of during the audit. And this was true in a lot of districts this year that I saw. There are a lot of agreements out there, but for the most part, they're short-term. They're in less than a year. And for the ones that are more than a year, if they're cancelable at any time by either party, those don't count either, because it would be difficult to say whether the district would continue that or not. And the other thing is what I've heard at other districts is they're more and more capitalizing on these short-term agreements because they don't know what if the price is going to increase, decrease, et cetera. So we did not see a ton of these items being booked and capitalized. So even though the district had to adopt the principle, there's nothing different than reported in the financials related to that, because all the agreements here either didn't meet the criteria or they were so immaterial that they didn't. And that's the only difference in this note. Following the notes, you are going to see the supplemental schedules. These are basically required trend reports on the district's pension liabilities and for both IMRF and TRS, and any kind of OPEB. So that would be other post-employment benefits or anything the district has in place for health insurance, et cetera, after retirement. So not pension related, but more health insurance is generally the OPEB. There are also a set of budget to actual schedules, and again, for the average reader, this might not be as important, but in terms of, working out the district's budget, reviewing those budget details, following up and monitoring what's happening in the district, those are really useful to look at. And on a more line item basis. I'm skipping to starting on page 77. We made it through all those pages so quickly. Right? All right, page 77 is our opinion on the federal programs. So the district, if the district expends more than $750,000 in a fiscal year of federal funding, they are required to have what's called a single audit. So it's an audit of their federal programs. The district's had a single audit for the last few years, especially with a lot of this, the pandemic related support funding. As part of that audit, we're looking at a little bit more than just those financial amounts. We're looking at compliance with various requirements of these federal rights. Okay, so we did have one matter that's noted, and I do want to say that when we look at findings for a federal audit, we are looking at something that would be classified as a material weakness, saying there was a very serious problem with the way that the district complied with requirements of the grant. There's a significant deficiency, which is a little bit less serious than material weaknesses, where there is an other matter. And so what we have noted is an other matter, meaning it's really small. It's so small, I believe the amount was around $700. And so I just want to kind of describe, that was, again, to me, very insignificant in the grand scheme of things. And it was really about reporting. And the way that it works with these federal grants, there are periodic expenditure reports that happen. And then there are other annual type reports. With the pandemic funding, there were rules, kind of changing as we went. There was a new report for fiscal, it was actually for fiscal 22 report that had to be submitted in 23. And the seriousness of the the compliance issue was that something was reported on the wrong line. So it wasn't that, the district didn't report everything. Unfortunately, as part of the audit, we were required to evaluate key line items and make sure that they agreed with what was reported on the first set of expenditures. One item was off on one line, so it really was very minor, again, just something we were required to be reported in $100. We're not worried about that. We do not believe there's a serious issue there. We make a recommendation that when this report is filed, it will be filed again from this year. It was new last year. Different staff may be doing it, not great guidance necessarily from the state or whatever. So our recommendation is just to make sure someone's comparing the both reports, making sure everything's tidy, reviewed by a second person. And again, it's not a huge concern. It's both important things. And that was it on the single audit. Following that page with our opinion on the federal audit is the schedule of expenditures by program. There's a description of those findings that I mentioned and our recommendation on page, and that's our recommendation. I think this is a district's corrective action plan is the last page of the report. I believe it should be 88. And that's basically it. So I'm almost done. In addition to the audit report, as part of the audit, we prepared the district's state reporting form called the annual financial report. And it's basically the same thing that you're going to see in these financial statements. The financial section of that report are identical to what you see in your fund financial statements. There are a lot of other supplemental pages that the district has to report on, things like the contracts over $25,000. How was the CARES Act money spent, and a variety of other little pages. But the other thing that's in there, which I believe is fairly important, is the financial profile score for the district based on the State Board of Education standards. So there are, I believe, 5 different measures, and the score is actually an indicator of the district's financial strength. And so there are a couple different categories. The highest category is the highest designation is recognition. And so for the last 3+ years, I believe it's at least 3 years, the district has achieved recognition. And in fact, this year they got a 4.0, and for 2023, it was 4.0. Again, the highest designation compared to 3.65 in fiscal 22. So we've seen progress in that financial profile score every year now. Extremely pleased that it's gotten all the way up to 4.0. So I'm very happy with that. So again, copies of the AFR public, I'm not sure if you get those copies as part of your report, but it does end up on ISB's website, so anybody can look at that. And if you want more detail about that, there are explanations as to how those scores are done. So. And then the last thing I want to talk about is what's coming up in the future. Guess what? There are no new accounting standards for fiscal 24. So that makes life a little bit easier for everybody. There is a new law, again, not for fiscal 24, but it's going to be effective in 24-25. And it's called the Operational Funds Expenditure Report and Reserve Reductions. And so this may not be concerned at this point for this district, but there are districts that are sitting on bigger reserves. And what the requirement is going to be, the district is going to be required to report annual average expenditures for the previous 3 years. And under this law, those operational funds were going to be the ed fund, the operations and maintenance fund, and the transportation. Those are the 3 funds that you'll be looking at. And basically what it says is if cash reserves exceed 2.5 times the annual average expenditures, the district will be required to file a reserve reduction plan with the State Board of Education. So again, maybe not a big deal at this point for this district. If your reserves were higher, something to think about. It's really another level of reporting. So reporting, I believe, is going to be happening in December. It sort of coincides, I think, with the annual statement of affairs, but we don't have a ton of guidance on it yet. Because it's pretty short. But just be aware that that's coming up. We like anything, reserving, flooding, etc. Great question.
I have one.
Okay,
I
good.
have some.
I,
You're right, that was really boring, and I mean that with love, because boring is good for audits, right? We
Yes,
don't want any
exactly.
problems.
Yeah.
In layman's terms, the reason we hired you, this is what I'm thinking, and I want you to tell me if I'm ever wrong, is to make sure that we are doing what we're supposed to do, there's no fraud, and we're in compliance with all programs.
correct. So it's the only thing that I would maybe disagree with a little bit in your statement is that the audit isn't necessarily about detecting fraud. That's a different type of audit. We are looking at opportunities for fraud. That's part of what we're looking at. So we expect the district's internal controls to deter or detect, but prevent, deter, and detect fraud. And so we look at it this way. We can't as an audit, we can't look at every single transaction. So we're looking on a test basis at transactions. But it would be very difficult for us to detect any kind of fraud that's occurring because of collusion. Okay, so we're looking to see that somebody approves this expenditure, somebody else looks at it. Ultimately, the board looks at all the expenditures, right? So looking at, and that's just one example of a control process that's happening here. We're looking at controls and saying, this is good. If the controls are followed, if the procedures are followed, and there's fraud, there's a good chance we would catch it on something like that. And we do catch things like that. But again, that's not the whole entire focus of the audit. It may sometimes come up, but we're looking to see whether those procedures are going to either deter it, detect it, prevent it. And then again, going back to what we do, we look at the procedures, we say, oh, this person does this. We literally walk through the routine of processing various transactions. And then we select transactions. Again, we select random transactions. We select a percentage of transactions. We have a variety of different ways of sampling the transactions. And then we say, okay, we need to see support for these transactions. And then we can look at the documentation that's happening throughout that process for approvals, et cetera. So.
But you don't tell us what our best practices are. You don't give opinions on best practices, or you.
If someone asks us, like, this is what we're doing, do you think that's a good practice? Absolutely. We refer people to different resources. I know probably, I'm assuming that Carly participates in, some networking groups with, there's Illinois, I forget what it was, IASBO stands for, but right. So districts are sharing, district business offices are sharing those kinds of things. We're happy to make recommendations. And again, we do. If Carly tells me and emails me during the year with a question about, hey, this is changing the laws for, our credit card processing, or, we're changing the way we do the lunch count, or whatever it happens to be. We're happy to answer those kinds of questions. Absolutely.
Okay, and the score that we got, is that a federal score?
No, it's just it's based on the State Board of Education's criteria.
Okay, who gives it? You guys? Or are you saying we've met this and here's your score?
We actually plug in the numbers in the annual financial report. The formulas are set by ISB. So all of the accounts that are considered in these scores, it's an Excel document, the dollar amounts below. So the ISB says, in order to measure the first component, which is, I'm not good off the top of my head, but it might be like.
Fund balance to revenue ratio.
Yes, okay, fund balance to revenue ratio, good.
That's
So
number,
it's a
that's
score
number
that you
one.
provide. It's
I
a
know.
score that, so we're
And this is
matched up
under
to
the
other
state's
schools
criteria,
under the
yep.
same criteria.
You can look up financial profile scores for any district in the state on the ISB's website.
And where we're at, are we at the highest level?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's, so, and lastly, so if I look at everything you got here, wow. We basically want to hear when you say, in our opinion, in all material aspects, you met, you're compliant required.
Correct.
And you met all the requirements.
Yes,
And then we're good and I can sleep.
we're good. And also the fact that there's no management letter. So, yeah, that's good. Yeah,
Thank you.
good question. Thank you.
I had a quick one about the upcoming reserve reduction act.
Sure.
Why would a district ever want to reduce their reserves?
Because again, it's a matter of, you know, should be fiscally responsible with taxpayer money, because if you're taxing a ton and sitting on that money, you know, without reason, right, exactly.
That makes sense.
Believe me, I mean, it's important to have those reserves, and there has been times here, probably in the past, there were no reserves, and, you know, I think there's been a little bit of building of these reserves, and a lot of that does have to do with the fact that, you know, you've gotten a little bit of extra money to be able to take care of things that maybe were left, you know, kind of
Parking,
untended, right, or.
right, roofs and parking lots and
Yes,
such.
and
So-
so that's given a little bit of breathing room, I think, on some of that tax money too, so it's helping restore some monies, and again, we're not talking, I didn't do a whole lot of analysis on reserves, because usually, that's really, we talk about that, but, you know, just a quick look at, you know, like the ag fund, for example, it was less than a year's reserves or something. That one.
Oh, yeah, far less.
Yeah.
Yeah, way less. But back to your point, John, earlier, why would could a district not levy to the full amount? There are districts that should not levy to the full amount because they have more than 2 years of fund balance. They don't have a building project. They don't have any maintenance coming up. They don't know how to spend their money. They shouldn't be taking taxpayer money. So the state legislators got mad seeing all these fund balances from districts that are able to carry fund balances, and they said, nope, you can't do that to taxpayers. So it's a legislation. Now, to Kathy's point that you mentioned earlier, which some of the questions that I have is, okay, but what about those districts who are bumping up against that number and want to do an addition? They don't want to go out to the taxpayers again and ask for a referendum. We've got a little bit of extra we've been saving for a while, or we have deferred maintenance where we know we're gonna be spending $1 million on flooring or in the next couple of years. Do we have to give that back then? You know, before you can never save up? What's the deal? So those are questions that immediately came to my head, and I'm sure Carly has more, and we talked about it a little bit, and I'm sure you've got even more.
Well, you know, it's really kind of goes along with what you were talking about earlier, it's like, set the levy and abate the taxes when you don't need to use that money. You know,
Correct.
If you get to that, point, yes, you can do that, and I think keeps your taxpayers, you know, happy.
It's wiser because it lets you be more smooth and long-term thinking versus up and down and wasting energy on running referenda, which is what some districts have to do more often, but if you can avoid it, it's a lot of energy expended for the district that's not necessary, perhaps. Just my 2 cents. Not really.
Good, I think that was all I had, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Appreciate it.
Yeah, nature way. $250,000 on reserve fund, you know, it's just sitting, once you give it back to us, it's like 20 bucks.
Yeah, right. Give it back or enhance the properties somehow.
All right, action items. Approval of house lease extension through June 30, 2025.
Okay, as we've talked about before, we have a house that we lease on our property to a staff member, and we would like to extend that for 1 more year.
I move to extend the house lease through June 30th, 2025.
All right, roll call, because it's.
Yep.
Madam Secretary, call the roll.
I'm sorry, John Edson,
Yes.
Brendan Murphy,
Yes.
Peter Petrini,
Yes.
John Russell,
Yes.
Brad Stetser,
Yes.
and Lisa Worcester. Yeah. Thank you.
B, approval of memorandum of understanding with MFT after school tutoring.
So because our contract doesn't address after-school tutoring specifically, and we would like to do some after-school tutoring, and we have Title I money that we just 2 weeks ago were blessed with from the state that we were not expecting, we'd like to take that and go use it for after-school tutoring, which actually principals have been asking about all year. So we'd like to do that and pay the teachers and have the authority to pay the teachers, and this doesn't.
So is that the rate that's in there?
Yeah,
50, is
it's
that
the-
just a set rate?
It's a minimum of 50 and then it's per diem rate. So for teachers who are a little bit lower on the salary schedule, it gets you at least the $50 an hour. Or teachers that are higher on the salary schedule, then they would get their per diem rate.
Motion to approve the memorandum of understanding with after school tutoring. Within that fee for it.
Second.
All right, motion has been made and seconded. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Brendan Burke,
Yes.
Peter Petrini,
Yes.
John Ruggles,
Yes.
Fred Stepson,
Yes.
Lisa Brewster. Yes. And John Lorenz.
Yes.
Fred, don't forget to stay after and sign. You've got to sign the,
Now you gotta sign the paperwork.
now you're responsible.
All right, memorandum of understanding with MFT regarding salary placement for SW2/Psych 3.
Social workers and psych. So they have a different, because they have a different schedule for their master's programs. We've talked about this. We start them at a different spot on the salary schedule. So just trying to stay up with our neighboring school districts. And actually, it's past practice that we've done for a while. We're just codifying.
Move to approve the memorandum of understanding with MFT for salary placement for social workers and psychologists.
Second.
Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
Peter Petrini,
Yes.
John Ruggles,
Yes.
Fred Stepson,
Yes.
Lisa Brewster. Yes. John Lorenz,
Yes.
Brendan Burke.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Approval of memorandum of understanding with PSRP 12-month vacation language.
So this is cleaning up the language to help it be more clear because there was different interpretations of when a 12-month employee, which would be our custodians and secretarial staff, are taking vacation or earning their vacation. When do they get it? This cleans up the language.
Didn't change anything. Just made it more clear.
Just made it more clear. And we had to pick a interpretation. So we picked an interpretation and clarified.
Sides are happy with the interpretation.
I think so.
You can't even comment about it.
No.
Move to approve the memorandum of understanding with PSRP for 12-month vacation language.
Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
John Ruggles,
Yes.
Fred Stepson,
Yes.
Lisa Brewster. Yes. John Lorenz.
Yes.
Murphy,
Yes.
and Peter Petrini.
Yes.
Motion passed.
All right.
So when John and I we're laughing because when we were going over the agenda, he said, what, who's getting a 12-month vacation? I'll have to reword it, and I never went back and reworded it.
All right, approval of mission statement.
Okay. This is our current mission statement. We had some discussion on whether or not the board wanted to approve it, continue it, change it. That's our current, so the board can make a motion to accept that one after review or change it, whatever you would like.
I would like to make a motion to just continue with the mission statement that we currently have.
No second.
Motion has been made and seconded. We go roll call?
Mm-mm.
No roll call. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion passed.
All right, thank you.
Approval of levy.
Move to approve the levy.
All right.
Got a lot of, non-discussion.
Yeah. All right. Madam Secretary, call the roll.
Fred Stepson,
Yes.
Lisa Brewster. Yes. John Lorenz.
Yes.
Brendan Murphy,
Yes.
Peter Petrini,
Yes.
and John Ruggles.
Yes.
Motion passed.
All right, consent agenda. Any questions, comments, concerns?
I move,
Should we have any concerns on this consent agenda?
no.
All good?
All
Move
good.
to approve the consent agenda as listed.
Motion has been made and seconded. Madam Secretary, call the roll, please.
Lisa Worcester, yes. John Arensis.
Yes.
Andrew Murphy.
Yeah.
Peter Petroni.
Yes.
John Russell.
Yes.
And Fred.
Yes.
Information discussion, carbon reduction audits.
Okay, just informational, one of you board members put the name in for a carbon reduction audit at the I conference. I got a call and they explained what it was, and so talked to Carly about it, and we said, well, that sounds like a good thing to get an idea of where we could save money. And they come in and they look at your roof to determine, what, if you could save money there, if there's any cost savings. They look at the lights, for example, these lights look different than the lights than the older section of the building, not in here, not in this room. In the older section of the building, because we've already done the oldest section to save money. So they would say, okay, if we replace these lights, it's gonna be a $700,000 cost up front, but you're gonna get that payback in a certain number of years based on your electricity savings, for example. So they'll do that, give us a report. It's free, can't hurt, it's great. If we can save some money, reduce some energy usage, and everybody wins. So that's it. Oh, so if there's questions, we still have
They
Jan.
specifically tell you how to say,
Yes,
that's good. Well,
Yep.
That's free,
it's free,
no obligation.
no obligations. It's through ComEd.
I like free.
Free's good.
That's good.
Calendar.
Calendar.
So we approved the calendar in January. You've seen it. If there's any questions, continue. We have one more opportunity to discuss it in January, but if you see anything you'd like to see change, let me know.
Have you, heard any negative comments from the community on it? 'Cause I remember last year there was quite a bit of, hoo-ha, but it
No,
seems pretty calm this year.
Yeah. I've heard different,
Same.
basically the same as this year. I've heard comments about it. Some people would like it shifted a little bit, but it's generally based on their personal preference, or their position in life. So if you've got younger kids, you might have a different feeling about when you have breaks. If you have older kids, you want it to align to the high school. All that. I just found out today, thanks to Ms. Jacobs, that the high school is gonna align with us, at least one high school is gonna align with us pretty closely.
Which one is that?
Lakes High School.
Yes, they should. We should set this.
We should set precedent. We've tried for many years. It didn't work. No.
And teachers are on board with this. Calendar.
Teacher.
That's a good one.
I think I've heard all kinds of opinions, but generally consistency, planning, we're good. Getting out in May is always popular.
Yeah.
The big ideas are pretty consistently. Yes.
CEDAW.
So briefly, I'll try to get the board a little bit of update on CEDAW. Last week, the CEDAW superintendent put in for retirement, the effective in June, end of June this year. So she will be retiring at the end of June and moving on to a different role. So CEDAW's in the midst of significant changes as well. And I'll try to fill the board in as I get more concrete information. But it's an interesting time at CEDAW with a lot of changes and now without leadership. And so I'll be involved with that pretty heavily. So if you have any questions about it or hear anything, please let me know.
Fred, you're the CEDAW representative.
Fred is
Was,
trying to keep
we
Fred
only- The governing board for CEDAW only meets quarterly, versus the executive board, which Jason is president of, meets monthly. So we don't necessarily get a lot of day-to-day information on the process. And this meeting was very, we had some presenters who felt very strongly about some things. The union spoke about the administration. There was one teacher who made accusations of fraud and felony forgery of some members of the administration, so, it was quite an active meeting, that you don't usually see, and it's hard not being in the day-to-day of it to actually know how to process that when you're just presented with it all of a sudden at a meeting like that. And we got the letter from, Dr. Donovan that day, that she was planning on retiring. And so that was also big news before that. But overall, the meeting went well. A lot of people, understand the role of CEDAW and, that we're ultimately there for the kids.
Yep. It's a lot.
It's a lot.
It's a large, complicated organization. There's 31 member districts. So if you know of anybody who's interested in running that district, let me know, but that's a really tough job. You have two boards, so like we're talking about the governing board and the executive board. And so the governing board only meets quarterly and the executive board meets monthly. Even that, how do you know what's really happening with something? So it's a lot. And you have 31 member districts. So you have 31 superintendents to deal with. You have 31 directors of special ed to deal with. You have 31 school boards to deal with,
That's
times
just-
7
That's like-
No, just.
Oh,
Lake
that's
County.
here.
That's just
County.
Lake County. Yeah, so it's very complicated and, Fred's getting more into that part of it, which is just fascinating to me, but
And it's meeting people from other districts there. You see your counterparts from other school boards.
Yeah. it's good.
Yeah, aside from just the ongoings of CEDAW, you can also, chit chat before after meetings about, hey, what's your district doing about X, Y, Z.
Yep, and there's great things happening for kids through CEDAL and through CEDAL in Melbourne. We have a partnership because we host 10 classrooms here on our campuses from CEDAL. So there's great things happening. It's just complicated and difficult to manage. That's all I got to say about that.
FOIA requests.
Okay, we had one FOIA request that we had to post this time, seeking the environmental testing for Melbourne schools, so we provided them the environmental testing for Melbourne schools. What we had. Upcoming agendas. Calendar approval, of course, activity fees coming up in January, registration fees. All that will be on the agenda for January, February. And much more, I'm sure.
Superintendent.
Is this a time when we put stuff on the agenda? We wanna-
Sure. Yeah.
Do we want to put on the agenda and sort of discussion about people in the district?
People want in the district.
Oh, residency issues. So you want an update
I
on
wanna make sure you
residency?
have power to do what you do, we have power to do.
Yeah.
If it becomes an issue.
I'll write it down. Residency.
We had. issues.
We've had issues. As long as I've been here, there's been issues. Concerns, so. John had some questions about it specifically.
I don't want to say, but.
No, that's good.
Good.
Yep.
All right, superintendent reports.
So we are, as we know, in the midst of the strategic planning process. So tomorrow is the first session. And only 2 people have signed up so far from 4 to 6, hopefully. Get some more and 1 person for Saturday, but then next week there's more people signed up, so that should be good. I know for noon or 11 to 1 on the 22nd, that's the last day of school. There's more signed up. It's great. couple of community members from Briargate. Trying to get them engaged and involved. So should be good. I'm excited. If you'd like to see, you can jump in and participate anytime. Just let me know you're coming. So if I cancel it, I know who to talk to.
Right, pizza on the 22nd.
Pizza on the 22nd. Might not be good pizza. It's not gonna be good pizza. Pizza. That's it. Oh, choir concert Thursday night, if you want to go to the choir concert,
Don't do that.
7 o'clock Thursday night at the middle school. Very exciting, and our seventh and eighth grade boys and girls basketball final end of the year tournaments are this week too.
Yeah, tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night. At Oak Grove.
And sickness is going around the schools, so that's impacted our basketball team, I know. You may not know that yet, Mr. Ruggles. No, the sickness has impacted our basketball team. There's a couple of players who are gonna be out.
That you know about basketball.
That note,
I just found out this afternoon.
I haven't found out at all.
I know, you might know that, not know that yet. That is a bummer,
How many?
too. So far. Many are dropping. Lots of sickness going around.
I think it's hard to balance the dichotomy of don't be truant, don't miss school, be in school,
Yep.
and then battling Vanco's emails,
Hmm.
which seem to come out all the
Every
time,
day.
all the time. Like, that's hard, you know, what do you do?
I'm glad Ben sent that out though.
That's tough, yeah.
My daughter's true.
Yeah, so my
I don't
daughter-
even know, so
Yeah.
there's probably a lot of
Yeah.
people who didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was sick for a while, but.
Right,
but that's gonna affect her score, you know.
yes, correct. Score just triggered another thought. If the board would like a presentation on the financial profile score and what that means, I'd be happy to do that. I have it ready to go. Can tell you all my thoughts in detail, or if you'd like an individual conversation, really go into detail on the financial.
I don't know.
Boosters chomping on the boots for that one.
I get
Will that be
excited about
2
that.
hour?
That will not be a 2 hour presentation. It's pretty simple when you look at it, and I'm not a big fan of the score in general, so. That's it for me.
Harley,
It's pretty short, now that we're through tax levy, we have a seal coating bid for both school parking lots on Wednesday. On Friday, I went to a 3 hour meeting with our insurance cooperative and learned a lot about risk insurance, so that was actually quite fascinating. A couple places I might create some little processes to reduce. Risk, as they say, nothing major, is drones, for example, you have to have a license for drones. I wouldn't use it, but anyway, I'm gonna go through everything I learned with Dr. Lind and you can see what we need to do with my 4 pages. That's about it. Oh, I have your reimbursement checks as well.
oh,
Most important.
win the night.
I saw that, email from Randy about the issue with our parking. Did you see that one?
No.
So, yeah, I responded to her because the hotel charged our credit card for incidentals,
Yeah.
but then she cut a check for us, but then the hotel reimbursed our credit cards, but then they're gonna charge us again for it, so,
Just watch it.
yeah. So I don't necessarily wanna cash that check if I'm not gonna charge them that. Repay it.
It's gonna mess up our audit score.
All right. Board report.
I was at Lakes the other day for a holiday concert, and they had an art show, and they had stuff from our middle school.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so I sent you a picture of one that I really like, so if you want to display it, it's from one of our students. Lillian S. had dropped off the rest of the last, but I thought, this is, for this time of year, this is very appropriate. You can find the email.
How do you even look at that?
Don't, this is cleaned up, actually. It used to go across 3 times. That's why I have another monitor to spread it out. There we go.
Calm down.
It's very good.
But there was a lot of good art students there as well.
So I already talked about CEDAW, went to the Lake County, Illinois Association of School Boards legislator breakfast. There were 5 state legislators there, represented across Lake County. It was nice to be able to talk with other school board members in the district. I'm not quite really sure what, the school district, I think, paid $36 for me to attend or whatever. I don't think the continental breakfast was quite worth $36, but, I don't know if the school was charging us for renting the space. Some of the questions, so they answered about like 6 questions from the audience, maybe 7. And then they sent out today a whole list of other questions that people wanted answered. I would like to see some of those other questions answered. But they would basically, every time a question was asked, they would pass the mic down and each one of the 5 would answer. In a lot of the answers were very similar. And so I just would have liked to see a little more moderation on the sort of event so we could get some more answers to things. And one of the questions, I just thought it was going the wrong way. It was asked, what do you see as a legislator as the most significant issues impacting education? Well, shouldn't it be the other way around? Shouldn't the legislators, be asking us as the school board members what we see are the important issues? So that's just issue with the moderation of that. The Winter Funderland, it was a combination of middle school and elementary school this year. It was a good time. A lot of middle school students showed up to help volunteer and work the booths, work the games. Carly came by and took a picture at my booth. I had my photo booth there. Ben was sweeping up floors at the end. So it's always nice to, I'm sure the community appreciates it, seeing the administration and staff, the board members getting their hands dirty at things. I attended an IASB webinar on the Green Ribbon District, Huntley. They're a pre-K through 12, so they have like 8,000 students. As part of their earning their Green Ribbon distinction, environmental stuff, they've reduced their energy costs from 2.4 million a year down to 800,000. So saving, and this was like a 10-15 year long process, switching the buses from diesel to propane or from fluorescent to LEDs. And something that I didn't think about, you think, oh, LEDs are cheaper per kilowatt hour. But what their business officer said, the big cost savings on there was because those last 10 to 20,000 hours, you're only replacing them every 5 years versus the fluorescents last 2,000 hours. You got to pay labor to get up there and change those every year. So that's where a big cost saving measure comes in on that. And a lot of it comes down to just asking for the money that's out there. There was a grant, I forget if it was federal or state, to get by school buses. They asked for 4, they got 4. Most other school districts only got 1 or 2, probably because that's all he just said. We asked for 4, so we got 4. So a lot of it comes down to just asking when the money's out there. And then Milburn Madness is coming up, months with the epic events. And I know last year they were saying, oh, if we hit this dollar amount, then Ben and Carter would sing, or Carrie would sing. They hit the dollar amount. They sang, I don't know if we as a board want to do something like that, get out.
You don't want us singing.
It'll be a fun time. I think it would be good because we're asking the community for a lot of money at that event to just support other things. So if we wanted to decide on something as a board that we can offer, I don't know, entertainment or maybe tap dance or something. Don't
I can play
Yeah.
it.
Don't tag it, Mark.
That'll be my.
You still can.
Yeah, I spelled that one.
All right, thanks, Brett. Anyone else? No? All right. I'm sure you are all looking forward to the fact that we have no closed session. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Made, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Let's go home.